I would traveled halfway around the world for this, the legendary full moon party. The question was, would it live up to the hype?
Every city has a story, every journey leaves a mark. Welcome to Night Wolf Travels, we guide you through the dark.
Speedboat journey itself was an interesting experience, bobbing up and down on the waves. Before long, Koh Samui disappeared into the distance, and Koh Phangan slowly coming into view. This was it, the island famous for the full moon party, the place I would traveled halfway around the world to see. And if I was being completely honest, I still was not convinced it was going to live up to the hype. After docking, I grabbed my bags and headed towards my hotel, Haad Rin, a place booked purely because it was close to all the action. No luxury, no fancy resort, just somewhere to sleep and recover when the inevitable damage had been done. The walk was not particularly far, about 10 minutes, but under the Thai sun, carrying luggage suddenly feels a lot longer than it actually is. Within minutes, I was sweating, not a gentle blow. Sweat dripping down my head and into my eyes. By the time I reached the hotel, I was ready for a cold drink and a shower, preferably in that order. My first impression of Haad Rin surprised me. It was not what I expected at all. In my head, I would imagined another typical Thai beach town. Instead, it felt quirky, almost like somebody had tried to build a tropical version of Jamaica. Colorful signs, reggae influences, weed stores everywhere, murals painted across buildings, neon signs glowing. The whole place had this slightly laid-back, alternative vibe to it, like the version of Jamaica you imagine in your head before you actually go there. Checking into the hotel went smoothly enough. There was even a friendly dog hanging around reception, performing for treats and stealing the limelight. Unfortunately, I had an uninvited guest in my room, and I am not talking about a freelancer. I would barely got inside when I spotted a fairly sizable cockroach making itself at home. Apparently, we would both be allocated to the same accommodation. Only one of us was staying. I headed back downstairs and explained the situation to reception. To their credit, it could not have been more helpful. One member of staff came upstairs and removed the unwanted guest, while the rest of the team helped move my things into another room. Problem solved. No drama, no arguments. Just one cockroach being forcibly evicted from a hotel room. If the cockroach has not put you off, check my hotel review on the Mantra Inn, link above. Once I would finally settled in, I headed back out to explore. The beach was only a short walk away, and the atmosphere already felt different from anything I would experience so far on the trip. People were arriving from all over the world, backpacks, buckets, flip-flops, questionable decisions waiting to happen. The ingredients were all there. I grabbed some pasta, overlooking the beach, and watched the afternoon unfold. The sea looked incredible. The bars were beginning to fill. Groups of people were already starting to gather. Nothing too crazy yet, but you could feel something building beneath the surface, like everyone was waiting for the same thing. The full moon party was still hours away, but Koh Phangan already felt like it was holding its breath, and the anticipation was building. Before finishing my pasta, I decided to go for a wander around Haad Rin. Everywhere I looked, people were arriving, backpacks over shoulders, flip-flops dragging through the dust, groups of friends trying to find their hotels. The occasional person already looking worse for wear despite it still being daylight. An impressive achievement. The closer I got to the beach, the more signs there were that tonight was not going to be a normal night. Temporary bars had appeared, music was getting louder, street vendors were setting up stalls, and everywhere you looked, people were carrying those famous alcohol buckets, small plastic buckets filled with spirits, mixers, and enough sugar to keep a small village awake for a week. I've not had one yet, but they were definitely on my radar. As the afternoon rolled on, The beach slowly started filling up. Not packed, not yet, but busy enough to know something was coming. People were posing for photos, groups were gathering around the bars, others were already sitting on the sand with drinks in hand, determined to secure a prime position for the evening ahead. I found myself stopping every now and then, just to take it all in. The sea, the atmosphere, the sheer number of people arriving. There was definitely an energy building, a strange mixture of excitement and anticipation. Like everybody was waiting for the same starting gun. Everyone seemed to have ended up on this one small stretch of beach for exactly the same reason, to see what all the fuss was about. My own feelings had not really changed. I would come this far, I was going to experience it. But I still was not convinced it was going to be the life-changing event some people made it out to be. Fun, probably. Memorable, hopefully. Life-changing? Doubtful. As the sun slowly began dropping towards the horizon, the atmosphere shifted again. The bars got louder, the beach got busier. The alcohol buckets started disappearing at a much faster rate. And suddenly it felt like the warm-up act was over. The main event was getting closer. As darkness started creeping across the beach, I grabbed myself a drink and found a spot overlooking the sea. The lights were beginning to glow, the music was starting to boom, and all around me, thousands of people were preparing for a night that they would happily remember, myself included. As darkness settled over Haad Rin, the atmosphere changed completely. The beach I would been casually strolling along a few hours earlier was almost unrecognizable. Music blasted from every direction. The bars were overflowing, and people just kept arriving. Thousands of them. Everywhere you looked, there were crowds moving in every direction at once, almost like sways of cattle moving in different directions. The whole thing felt far more chaotic than I had imagined. Before fully committing myself to the evening, I decided to get involved properly. If you are going to attend a full moon party, you might as well look the part. So I found one of the body paint artists and let them get to work. A bright blue, green and red dragon running down my left arm. A questionable fashion choice perhaps, but probably one of the more sensible decisions I made that evening. At some point I also acquired my first and only alcohol bouquet. For those unfamiliar with the concept, imagine a small bucket containing 3 Red Bulls and half a bottle of vodka. A combination apparently designed by somebody with absolutely no concern for tomorrow morning. Needless to say, I bought one. As the night gathered momentum, I drifted between the bars and the beach. 1 minute, I was watching fire dancers. The next, people were attempting to jump over flaming skipping ropes, some successfully, others less successfully. Alcohol and fire, a combination that somehow felt perfectly normal. Koh Phangan. The crowd itself was fascinating. People from all over the world packed onto one stretch of beach. I could hear Australian accents everywhere. In fact, I remember one Australian guy kicking at my bright yellow vest and say, "You know, mate, I saw you coming from a mile away." But to be fair, he probably was not wrong, but it was a very random comment that stuck in my mind. The longer the night went on, the busier everything became. The beach, the bars, the walkways, even moving around started becoming an adventure. At times it felt like the entire island had been squeezed into one giant outdoor nightclub. One thing that surprised me was that despite all the stories I had heard, I never really felt like this was the kind of place where I was going to meet someone. Maybe it was the sheer size of the crowds, maybe it was the atmosphere, or maybe everybody was simply focused on surviving their own night. Whatever the reason, this felt different from other nightlife destinations in Thailand, different from Chaweng. I did not come across any freelancers or any ladies of that kind. This was about experiencing the event and being part of the madness. That's exactly what time I left. Your guess is as good as mine. At some point, the drinks, music, and general chaos merged into one long, blurry memory. The details become harder to piece together after that. What I do remember is standing on the beach at one point and looking around. Thousands of people, Music pounding through the sand, fire lighting up the darkness, and thinking, this really is quite something. Whether it was life-changing, that answer would have to wait until the morning. The next thing I remember was waking up back in my hotel room, still fully clothed. The draken was still running down my arm. My mouth felt like the desert, and I could feel my kidneys reminding me of the Red Bull and vodka mixed with random beers through the night. After some coming around, I dragging myself out of bed and into the shower for a refresh. Thankfully, no cockroaches in there this time. I headed out into Haad Rin, across the now deserted beach. The contrast was remarkable. Less than 12 hours earlier, the place had been absolute chaos. Now I felt like somebody had pulled the plug. The crowds had disappeared. The music had stopped. Handfuls of people lazy around sunbathing and recovering from the previous night's mayhem. I found somewhere to grab some food and sat watching the recovery operation unfold around me. Some people looked fresh, some looked wrecked. The beach itself was returning to normal. The madness had passed, and suddenly it just looked like another beautiful stretch of Thai coastline. As I sat there, I found myself thinking about the full moon party. I would come all this way, not just for the full moon party, but it was one of the main events on this trip. I had now crossed it off the bucket list with a whole bunch of other things. And now the question was obvious. Was it worth it? The honest answer, yes. I am glad I did it. It was fun. The atmosphere was incredible. The scale of it was impressive. And there really is not anything quite like it that I've done before. But was it life-changing? No, not for me. I would come this far, so I might as well see what all the fuss was about. My intuition before had been telling me it was slightly overhyped, and after experiencing it, I think that incident was probably right. That is not a criticism, far from it. If you are traveling through Thailand, and you've never done it before, I would absolutely recommend experiencing it once. At least then you will know. Once was enough for me. I do not sit here now wishing I could go back and do it again, unless I were with a group of mates or with a lady. But as a solo traveler, once is enough. I'm glad I experienced it. The funny thing is, the full moon party had been one of the main reason I would travel to Koh Phangan. Yet as I sat there eating breakfast, I could not help feeling that the best parts of the trip were probably still ahead of me, and I was not finished with Koh Samui just yet. One last night, after spending most of the day recovering from the full moon party, I still had one more night left before heading back to Koh Samui. And thankfully, this one was going to be considerably less chaotic. At least that was the plan. The atmosphere around Haad Rin felt completely different now. The crowds had thinned out. The backpacker invasion was retreating, and the town was slowly returning to normal. It almost felt like I would arrived in a different place. 24 hours earlier, it had been one giant outdoor nightclub. Now it was just a relaxed little beach town again. Later that evening, I decided to treat myself to a massage. Purely for recovery purposes, of course. Or at least that is what I told myself. Now, anyone who has spent enough time in Thailand knows that sometimes a massage is just a massage, and sometimes it is not. I will leave the rest of that story to your imagination. Afterwards, wandered back towards some of the bars. Nothing too wild, just a few drinks and a chance to enjoy the atmosphere before leaving the island. At one point, I found myself playing pool with a random collection of people that only Thailand could somehow bring together. A Belgian guy, a few Russians, some Thai locals, and me. The bloke with the fading dragon tattoo and a body still trying to process the previous night's vodka bouquet. I ended up having another Red Bull and vodka bouquet, but this time it was not full moon party prices. It was actually about half that price of the night before. The next morning it was time to leave Koh Phangan behind. I packed my bags, checked out of the hotel, said goodbye to the friendly dog at reception, and made my way back towards the ferry. And ahead of me was one final night back in Koh Samui. The full moon party was done. The bucket list had one less item on it, and despite my reservations beforehand, I was glad I would experience it. The ferry journey back to Koh Samui passed without incident. No drama, no hangovers from hell. Just a chance to sit back and watch the islands drift by. Looking out across the water, I found myself reflecting on the last few days. The full moon party had been fun. The atmosphere had been incredible. But if I was being honest, I was looking forward to getting back to Chaweng. There had been something about the place that I would take into immediately. The balance of it, busy enough to be interesting, relaxed enough to breathe, proper holiday atmosphere without feeling completely overrun. And unlike Pattaya, it felt like people were there for all sorts of different reasons. Some for the nightlife, some for the beaches, some for the food, and some because they would probably booked the wrong island. Before long, I was checking into my hotel for the final night. This time I was staying at the Koh Beach Hotel, another solid option in a great location. Close to the beach, close to the nightlife, and perfectly placed for one last evening in Chaweng. If you would like a closer look, I have got a full hotel review on the channel. After getting settled in, I headed out for a walk, and almost immediately it felt familiar. The bars, the music, the beach, the constant flow of people moving through the streets. It felt good to be back. As evening arrived, I found myself falling into a routine that had become surprisingly familiar over the previous few days. Starting at Pineapple, having a drink, watching the world go by, then slowly drifting further into the nightlife. No real plan, no destination, just seeing where the evening took me. One thing I would learned long ago about Thailand is that the best nights are rarely the ones you try to force. The more you chase them, the more they seem to avoid you. The memorable nights usually arrive when you are not expecting them, when you simply let things happen. At that point, I thought this would just be one final night out before flying back to Bangkok. A few drinks, a few conversations, a few memories, then onwards to the next chapter of the trip. Simple, or so I thought. Because before long, I was about to meet somebody who would leave a much bigger impression on me than I ever expected. The last night, back in Chaweng, the evening started much like the others. A drink at Pineapple, wander through the bars, no real plan, just seeing where the night would take me. By now, Chaweng felt familiar. The faces, the music, the atmosphere. It had become one of those places where you quickly find your rhythm. As the evening unfolded, I met a lady from Laos. And unlike some of the encounters earlier in the trip, there was something different about this one. Nothing dramatic, and you could put your finger on immediately. We just got on. Conversation flowed naturally. There was warmth there, a sense of ease, the kind of company that makes you forget to keep checking the time. Her friend in the bar put a 1 baht coin on the counter as token payment for her, from me as a joke, as a way of saying to me, this was not purely business. I took this as a good sign that this girl was golden, and I was right. We drifted between bars, talked, laughed, had a few drinks, and before long the evening had taken on a life of its own. The funny thing about traveling is that sometimes the people you remember most are not necessarily the people you spend the longest with. Sometimes it is simply about how they make you feel in a particular moment, and there was definitely something about her that stayed with me. Eventually we made our way back to the hotel, and this is where I made my second questionable decision of the trip. You already know where this is going. I ignored my own rules again, and yes, went in unsheathed, twice in one trip. And by now, I'm going backwards in my life experience. I am forgetting everything I have learned over the years, becoming less unwise, and getting carried away. At the time, it felt like one of those decisions that future me could worry about later. Present me was clearly not interested in conducting a proper risk assessment. As you will discover later in the series, that decision would come back to haunt me. The next morning we went for breakfast together at the hotel restaurant overlooking the sea. And this is the part I remember most clearly. Not the bars, not the drinks, not even the night before. We sat together chatting over food before I had to leave for the airport. The trip was moving on. Reality was slowly creeping back in, and there was an unspoken understanding that our time together was coming to an end. At one point, she looked at me with an expression I still remember now, almost adoring. I asked her if she was okay. She smiled and said, "Everything is perfect. You are perfect for me." Now, whether she truly meant that, or whether it was simply one of those Thailand moments, I will for you to decide. And for a moment, I did not quite know what to say. After breakfast, we headed back to the hotel, spent a little more naughty time together, and then it was time to leave. No drama, no grand declarations, no promises, just two people going in different directions. She did ask if I will come back though. I replied with, "At some point, yes." What more could I say? As my taxi pulled away towards the airport, I found myself thinking about the last few days, the full moon party, the beaches, the bars, the people. And unexpectedly, it was not the party that occupied most of my thoughts, and the trip was far from done. Coming up in the next part, I make my return to Pattaya, where things start to get crazy. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss out on that. Also, if you're enjoying this content, give the video a like. It helps it to rank. Until the next time.
Every city has a story, every journey leaves a mark. Welcome to Night Wolf Travels, we guide you through the dark.
The journey never ends.